Well, welcome to Chapter 6. You'll notice that we have a little bit different scenery this time. I moved this session to my local library just to have us change the scenery and also to get a little bit more quiet. So you won't be seeing Maggie run around either, but we'll get back to Maggie's home here shortly. In Chapter 5, it was all about determining what we need now and in the future, and how we're going to fulfill those needs. To briefly recap, we have a business and a recruiting strategy, and they are compatible. We understand the legal ramifications within which we must operate, and we know what tasks and jobs must be performed in our organization now and in the future. All of that leads us to a forecast, and that leads us to a recruiting plan. Chapter 6 is about sourcing, or if you will, searching. Some of these chapters seem to overlap significantly, and that may be causing some confusion. Well, this is particularly true with chapters 5, 6, and 7. Don't fret. They do overlap, and there is not a clear delineation from one to the other. To clarify, let's go back to the fishing analysis. Chapter 1 and 2 define how fishing fits into our lives. Are we making money out of fishing? Are we professional fishermen or guide, etc.? Or are we just doing it for fun? Regardless of our intent, how will we meet our goals in a general sense? Chapters 1 and 2 are about establishing goals and guidelines that will govern our fishing behavior and our activities. Chapter 3, the legal context, is about those external guidelines that further restrict our activities. Some places are restricted from fishing. Some methods are restricted. You can't use dynamite to fish, for example. And some fish can't be caught at certain times of the year. And there are many more external restrictions, but you get the idea. Chapter 4 defines what tools we need to fish now and in the future. Rods and reels and a boat, etc. What fishing tasks must we accomplish to be successful at fishing, whether amateur or professional? And these tasks and requirements are defined with great specificity to enable measurement towards success. Chapter 5 takes place in general, but also takes place before each fishing trip. General forecasting and planning relates to our developed strategy in terms of what fish we need, what equipment do we need, a big boat or a small boat, etc. What locations do we plan to fish, how much time do we plan to devote to fishing, etc. What kinds of fish do we intend to seek, and what are we fishing for helps us determine our location and the bait that we're going to use. This forecasting and planning also takes place before each and every fishing trip, or if you will, before each and every recruiting activity. Where will we fish? For how long? All of that is covered in Chapter 5. Chapter 6 deals specifically with where we will fish, the weather we expect to encounter, and most importantly, given we know what type of fish we want to catch, where are they? Chapter 6 is about sourcing. The authors use the analogy of marketing to explain sourcing, and that's a good analogy. The marketing department in any organization tries to determine who are likely customers to purchase our product or service, and where do we find those customers. My recruiting activities at RCA related to engineers and focus on recruiting from two sources: competitors and finding new graduates from 5 very specific universities. At Nestle, we source locally and regionally for most jobs, but nationally for people with expertise in food manufacturing and advanced technology degrees. Pro football teams source from competitors and college through the college draft. Pro baseball teams have developed a farm system from which they develop specific talent. In my previous Nestle example, we placed successful applicants on the acceptable applicants list. Those applicants possessed the skills required to join one of our teams. When a position came open, we recruited from that list. I guess you could say that we sourced broadly at first and then narrowed it down to a very specific list from which to recruit when a job became available. I believe a prominent mistake in many recruiting endeavors is to underplay the sourcing step in the process. And in so doing, we relegate our organizations to recruiting in just one or two places. We ignore new opportunities due to our success in the old haunts. Let's face it, old fishing holes dry up, or the fish just move elsewhere. Such as it is with recruiting sourcing. The text lists over 20 external sources and 6 internal sources for recruiting. The authors then discuss each source in some detail. Now, I won't reiterate that discussion here, but I will elaborate on just a few. Suffice it to say that sourcing is about searching, or more importantly, sourcing is about creating choices, as many choices as possible. Choices are important. Too few choices, and we limit our opportunities for a good hire. You take what you can get, and what you can get is very limited. That's true in all aspects of life. Too many choices add confusion to the recruiting process, and having too many choices can add unnecessary cost. There's a fine line between limiting our choices to what's manageable and expanding our choices to what's optimal to create maximum effectiveness. As I said, that's true in all aspects of life. Think about your own searches. You search for a school, you search for a major field of study, you may search for a house or a position, a life partner for sure, an employer, etc. Choices are important in all of these and are certainly important in recruiting. I'm a strong believer in internal recruiting. Internal recruiting is much more than just looking inside the organization for people who want to move up. Succession management is a key component of internal recruiting. Succession management is very much future-oriented. Major League Baseball employs succession management throughout and has done so for decades. Baseball teams constantly place new hires on a team in the minor league system and develop them based on future needs. Everyone wins in this scenario. Players experience slow and effective development that increases the likelihood of career success. They are slowly developed rather than being dumped into game situations against seasoned competitors for which they can't succeed. Such dumping ensures failure. How many times have you seen employees promoted into a job for which they are ill-prepared and fail within a few months? Regardless of how understanding management is, such failure harms a career. Organizations win because they have a source of talent ready to move into an open position with minimal loss of time, energy, and money. Organizations also win due to reduced turnover. Employees are happy because they see opportunity that's available and visible. New positions are inevitable when organizations grow, and filling those positions effectively and efficiently ensures organizational stability. Remember our earlier discussion? Organizational growth comes from stability. Succession management begets stability, which begets growth. Everybody wins. I have found that often the best talent is right under your noses or sitting at the desk next to you. We simply overlook them. Of course, we overlook them until they turn in their resignation and accept a job with some other company, maybe even one of our competitors. Now, this is not just an unrealistic, high-handed vision of how I would like to see the world work. It's not me trying to be noble or sophisticated. I believe in internal recruiting, and I also believe that many organizations give lip service to internal recruiting. They say they value it, but don't really provide a path or the tools to support internal recruiting. I've seen internal recruiting work firsthand. I've initiated succession planning, assessment centers, talent inventories, and other employee development programs in many different organizations. I have witnessed their success and subsequent transformation within the organization. One such success was in the supervisory ranks at RCA. That organization recruited internally for supervisors but provided little to support an internal recruiting process. And the results were very harmful to the organization and employees. In the early 1980s, and in that manufacturing facility in which I worked, RCA supervisors were mostly males. They were mostly picked by their direct managers, and such selections were based on very loose criteria. For example, the manager liked them. And many of these supervisors were nudging the line of incompetence and nudging it pretty hard. Upper management agreed that these supervisors could not guide their work groups to meet the future challenges, and many of the supervisors were nearing retirement age. Replacing them in the same way with the same competence was out of the question. To meet this current and future need, I developed an assessment center for supervisors. Now, I did so with the help of an outside consulting firm specializing in developing such tools. Our goals were to, number one, survey employees and develop a list of employees who were interested in the supervisor position. Using the assessment center, identify the skills needed to be a successful supervisor. Assess interested employees and identify those who possess the skills and possess them in the right amount to be successful and a competent supervisor. Place those employees who successfully completed the assessment center in the right position as the position became available. And identify those employees who had developmental needs or identified through the assessment program, and provide training to improve their skill set for future openings, and finally, to improve the competence of current and future supervision. Now, this was a long-term process, but the results were very interesting. The Assessment Center identified a large number of female and minority employees who possessed strong leadership and management skills. Many possessed these traits to such a high level that they could assume a supervisor's position immediately. These employees had been overlooked in the past. They were right there under management's noses, but unseen. To be sure, there were white males identified with skills who had been overlooked as well. And all of these would have been overlooked in the future without the commitment to internal quality recruiting and the development of tools to enhance that recruiting. Why were they unseen? Well, one may assume discrimination, and perhaps there was some of that, but non-minorities were also overlooked. So why were they unseen? Simple. No one was looking. Management had relegated its choices to those employees they liked, often to those employees who didn't pose a challenge to management or who didn't ask questions. And since new supervisors were often chosen by the direct manager, can an organization depend on one manager to make a good choice? But what if that manager was incompetent himself? What are the chances that an incompetent manager would choose an incompetent supervisor? I'd say pretty good. If you extrapolate this scenario out, you can see how limited sourcing can negatively impact an organization over time. In the assessment program, we developed those internal employees who were ready for the position, and they were promoted as soon as possible, and supervisor competence within the facility greatly improved almost immediately. The improvement was so apparent that other RCA facilities requested their own assessment center program to develop current employees. The assessment center program was time-consuming and expensive, but the results proved to be of great value to the organization. Having problems recruiting skills? The solution may be right under your nose. Internal recruiting is important and desirable, but done wrong, it can be devastating to an organization and to employees. As much as I believe in internal recruiting, I also believe in external recruiting. All organizations need new blood from time to time. In general, I favor promoting within about 80% of the time and recruiting outside 20%. Now, obviously that varies from organization to organization and varies based on the situation. Suffice it to say, I believe in both, but strongly favor internal recruiting. As I said earlier, the text covers external sources in great detail. One note, the authors include a brief discussion of using external recruiters and search firms. I think that source needs much deeper exploration. I've used that source extensively in my career. However, I will discuss that topic in greater detail in Chapter 7. Remember, these chapters frequently overlap. As you can see, there are many different sources to consider. Once again, there's great danger in using one source over and over due to past success. Consider all sources. Each one has time and cost consequences that must be realized. Remember, hiring fast yields fast mistakes. Hiring slow yields greater chance for a successful hire. Just like in fishing, just like in marriage, just like in searching for a school, just like searching for an employer, and on and on and on. One final word. This chapter should yield reverse results for each of you. You have learned that there are many different sources you can utilize to create a successful hire. Are you depending on one resume to sell your skills? Are you depending on one source to display your skills? Are you narrowing your job search adequately to concentrate your time and money effectively? Or are you narrowing your job search too much? Are you looking for quick success? Or are you willing to invest more time in the search? How many times have you said, good companies don't recruit from the internet or college websites or state employment agencies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? How many times have you said, I can't look for a job now because I may have to turn down an offer due to graduation or money or family issues, et cetera, et cetera? You know what? You can't turn down something that's not offered, and no offer will be forthcoming from sources not explored. I advise companies to recruit for the present and the future. I also advise others to search for a job now and in the future. I tell companies to recruit aggressively. Likewise, you should job search aggressively. Next week, we'll explore actual external recruiting. Up until now, we've been planning and preparing for our fishing trip. Next week, we'll wet a line.